Hello, welcome to the January 3rd, 2023 Club Cubase live stream. I'm going to do a quick audio test and then we will begin. Bear with me just for a moment. All right, so it sounds like my monitoring computer is fine. We want to wish everyone a happy new year. Hope everyone had a wonderful holiday season. And this is our first Club Cubase live stream of the year. If you have not attended a Club Cubase live stream before, how it works is you can submit questions in the live chat field or simply ask questions. You could send it in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de as well. So if it's a more involved question, you could do that. When asking questions, if we could specify which version of Cubase you're using, whether it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, which operating system, if you're running Mac OS or Windows, and which level of Cubase, so which version, so if it's version 12, 11, 10.5, 10, etc., that information is helpful. When asking questions, realize that my ability to answer questions in real time will soon be eclipsed. I will try my best to catch up throughout the live stream. But if we could avoid asking, if you don't see an immediate response to your question, if we could avoid asking the same question over and over again, that would be appreciated. If you want it, we should have a index of all of the topics covered in the live stream today pinned to the top of the comments field several hours after the live stream. So you could use as a reference point to find particular questions, but if you wanted to search for particular topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com. We want to thank Jan for creating that website. We also want to thank Agent K and Jazz Dude for serving as moderators. They're not Steinberg employees. They just kind of do this out of the goodness of their hearts and to make it a better community experience. One other great resource of information that's available is also the Cubase Nation Discord, and Jazz Dude does a lot of work with that, so we'll give special thanks for that. So we hope that everyone, again, had a wonderful holiday season, and let's go ahead and get started. I'm sure we have lots of questions coming, so we will go ahead and begin. And again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America, primarily focusing on Steinberg products, and I'm presenting from Alexandria, Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C. in the United States. And if you're watching the live stream live, or if you're watching this on replay, feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. All right, so we see Mark Winslow wishing everyone a happy new year from Hawaii. Thanks for joining us. All right, so first question is from Mark Davenport. Hi, Greg. In Cubase Pro 11, when splitting audio events to adjust clip gain, can you adjust just the beginning and ends like you can with MIDI events? Or do you only get the single handle to adjust the whole clip? So with MIDI events, I don't think we have, there aren't handles necessarily. So if we could adjust, because MIDI and audio are slightly different, so we can kind of truncate the events. But with audio events in clip gain, if we split the event, so say we split this event here, we could adjust it kind of globally. But if we wanted to adjust the beginning and end, as soon as you kind of hover over, you'll see these little handles at the top of the event. So if you wanted to do fades, so this isn't necessarily available in MIDI because it's actually doing kind of an audio edit as opposed to MIDI data. So but let me know if I misunderstood, but you can adjust the edges if you wanted to adjust the clip gain, and also if you wanted to just grab the pencil tool on audio events, you could adjust the clip gain accordingly just by selecting different nodes on the particular audio events using the pencil tool. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, so we see Sir Robert from Atlanta. All right, we have Arif B. Check in. We see Jazz Dude. Wishing everyone a happy new year. All right, so we see Soren checking in from Sweden. We have Uno Memento from Finland. Right, we have Stefan, also from Sweden. We have Robbie Bowling from Dallas. We have Arif B from Holland. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so we have a question. Greetings from NC, I guess North Carolina. Is there a way to make the spectrum analyzer to show the post plugins insert signal? I can't see any changes I made on plugins. So if you want to kind of get a sense of what the plugin is doing, when we do just this particular file, we could see, so if we come over here to our spectrum analyzer, we could see the result, and this is showing the audio file, but not what's actually being processed on it. So if we wanted to go to, let's say our control room, and let's go to my inserts on my control room, and I'll open up, like, let's say the supervision plugin. So I will switch this over to more, so let's say our spectrum bar. So let's say if I just am playing this particular drum loop here, so, and let me switch this to spectrum curve. So we can see kind of our frequencies being adjusted here. So if I wanted to see what was going on kind of as after plugins, I would maybe just load this up on the master insert or in the control room. So as I adjust, let's say, a plugin, so I'll come here to the studio EQ, that now we'll see kind of the changes reflected, kind of what's going on here. So if we wanted to, we can see the low end kind of increase, or we can take the high end, and let's say if we decrease the high end, we can see that roll off here. And if we bring that up, we can see the increase. And we could see that visually in real time with a real-time plugin. But the actual spectrum analysis is going to show, it's the intention within the audio file is just to kind of show the process or what frequencies are on the file without the processing. But again, just use like under the analysis category, the supervision plugin, and then you should be able to see the results of whatever processing is going on. All right, so you see from Dallas LaRue, question, I know how to drag samples into the Groove Agent instrument pads, but unlike the pattern pads, they can't be dragged into the project. How do you get them into the project? Okay, so the concept is that we would take particular pads, if you're dragging it, so let's say if I have an empty instance, I'll just come over here to this instance of Groove Agent. And let's say I have blank pads here. So if this point we'll just say, okay, I want to go to Groove Agent library, and let's say I was looking for just all right, so let's say, okay, I'm just going to find a snare. Okay, so, if you wanted to be on an actual track, you could just drag it from where you dragged it. But let's say I'm going to drag it directly onto the pad. So now we can trigger this particular sound. Now this is just going to be a particular, a particular sample. So we have a MIDI note that would trigger this. So let's say if I wanted this, so I don't think it's intended to, drag the sample out to an audio track, but what you could do is just draw in a particular MIDI note. So let's say, okay, this is going to be F6. So we see this note. Okay, I'll just drag it to I'll just do this on the new, because we have this kit. So I'll just say no drum map. Okay, so let's say we go to F6. So now if I wanted to just, have a particular sample here, so I could just say, okay, I'm going to take this note, and then at this point we could just say, okay, let's do a render in place. And we'll just come over here. And then you could just have the particular drum sample laid out for you. So it's not intended to, but if you're dragging and dropping it onto a pad, you could just as easily drag and drop that to the project window, to the project window. But once it is on a pad, create a MIDI event with that particular note and then just render in place. And then you could turn that directly into an audio file wherever you want. All right, wonderful. See Jan from Stockholm from Cubase Index. Thanks for joining. We see Benny. All right, and we have Mr. Dali 67 from Denmark, wishing everyone a Happy New Year. All right, we have Rich Schweitzer checking in from West Palm. All right. All right, so we see from question, hello, Greg. Thank you for this great work you're putting. So the question is, can I set up a key command to insert warp markers at the cursor position while listening to an audio event? Okay, so let's say if we're here and we wanted to see if it's under the audio or there's a key command for all right, so I'll just switch to my free warp and see if there's a key command for it. So I don't know what doing it, but most of the time, the typical method would be, maybe not like dropping it in as markers or kind of on the fly, but if we take, what a lot of people end up doing, and this isn't necessarily on the fly, I realize. So let's say if we're here and we go to hit points, and we go to, and let's say we edit our hit points, that we could now at this point just create, warp markers directly that way. So, it's kind of more not based on like a inputted marker, but, you could just convert the warp markers. So as soon as we switch to our warp markers tool, that we'll see the warp markers kind of automatically populated. But I don't know of a key command to automatically drop them in, but you could manually do it. So, but I don't know of a key command off the top of my head, but, Cubase will automatically determine the hit points, and that often will negate the need for having to drop markers in real time, because you could just take the hit points and again convert those hit points into warp markers. All right, so we have a question from Benny. Is it possible to have slightly different shades for the grids vertically? Whatever zoom level you're in, 1 bar or 4, depending on zoom level, would be slightly lighter than the previous. So I don't know. I don't think that that's possible. I think that the shading would be consistent regardless of your zoom level. And I can see that as if you zoomed in and out, that might get annoying, that the color tint is kind of changing in the background. So there's probably a lot of people with OCD that could freak out, but I don't think that there's a way of doing that. All right, so we have Mark Nelson checking in from Montana, where it's cold and snowy, and he's ready to learn. That's great. All right, so we have a question. If an individual element gets triggered from a sidechain element and I want to do an export for the triggered element in Solo, will the exported file be included with the sidechain triggered event? So there was changes with this in version 12. So let me just open up a quick project. Just set up a quick sidechain scenario. Okay, so let's say I wanted to set up a sidechain on this track from the kick. All right, so now I'll have this kick just kind of sidechain the synth. Okay, so let's say we want to solo this and do an export. Okay, so we'll just do our stereo out. Let me just put it into this. Tell it to put it back into the project. We'll have it create an audio track, and we won't do real-time export. All right, so it doesn't do it if it's soloed, but I think if we come over here, let's say if instead of doing an export, that if we render in place, And let's just choose our channel. We'll just do complete signal path. So if you do a render in place instead, then the render in place carries over. The sidechain. So the sidechain information will be included, and it will be included, but if it's the other track is muted, then it's not going to be sending it. So if you solo the track, but if you just wanted to do a render in place instead of soloing the track, the sidechain information will get included that way. So that might be a better approach. And I think that came in version 12 or version 11. So some earlier versions might not carry that over. All right, we have Alexander Plasko wishing myself and everyone a new year. All right, so we have a question. Do you recommend using multiple instances of a VST like Complete or Opus, or only one with multiple MIDI channels linked to each instance? So it could really depend on the particular instrument. Most instruments, I think most instruments don't take advantage of multiprocessors. So if you had a particular project with a VST instrument that is loaded up, that has multiple sounds loaded, like, let's say 16 channels in Contact or 16 channels in Hallion. So I'll just show you that often those only use one processing core, and that could take more in. So that doesn't spread out the processing. But if the instrument, and I'll show you one here. So let's say if we go to Hallion Sonic SE, for most instruments, it's better to have more instances of the instrument, because that's spread out. But if you have an instrument like we could see here, it depends on. The big thing is how it's utilizing multi-cores for processing. So when we come to like Hallion Sonic SE, I could have this set for multi-cores use. So, but a lot of instruments don't have that. But if those instruments that you're using supports multi-core within a single instance of the instrument, then there's not as many consequences. So check to see that. So if it doesn't support multiple cores, then I would run more instances of the particular instrument to spread out the CPU, the multi-CPU utilization. All right, so we see Jesse Carmichael on. Great to see you on, Jesse. Says, I know I asked this. I'm still waiting to find a keyboard shortcut to change a point on a MIDI CC line from a step to a ramp. Okay, so let's say if we have... Let's say, I'll come over here, and great to see you on, Jesse. Hope you and your family had a wonderful holiday season. All right, so when we come here, we could choose to toggle between step and ramp here. So I think that there is a keyboard shortcut for this, and that would allow you to kind of draw in, like as you enter in a new value, that it could be ramped up as opposed to just entering in a step. So I think that there is a keyboard shortcut for this. Let's take a look, see if it's under... See if it's under editing. Yeah, so if we go to MIDI menu, type of new controller event, and you'll see toggle between step and ramp. So once again, under MIDI category, Jesse, just come right over here to type of new controller events, toggle step/ramp. I may have set that. I don't think that's a standard keyboard shortcut. I think I may have set that up when you asked about it before. But let me know if that is what you're looking for, Jesse. And thanks for joining us. You'll be our celebrity attendee today. All right, wonderful to see John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin. See Paris Morantz just saying, I'm sorry for the lowercase g in Greg's name. So no offense is taken at all. So. All right, so we have Gregory M saying hello from Pennsylvania. So I have lots of family from Pennsylvania. Both my parents were there. My chat field just jumped on me. All right. Okay, so we just see a question. Please, I'm a beginner and want to learn. I want to understand mixing and what actually makes the voice nice. Well, having a great singer with a great voice is always helpful. But, a lot of times it's, I see so many people that, spend so much time, working on maybe some of the wrong things or trying so hard to do so much processing that the processing kind of fights itself. So often, keeping it pretty simple can make a big difference in, what makes a nice voice. So let's say here I will often just put a little bit, maybe a little bit of compression, maybe a little bit of, reverb, a little bit of EQ. But, with voice, always try to, capture the source as best as possible. But let's say we'll listen to this project here with this voice. So we'll take a look at what processing I have on here. So a little bit. So I have just a little bit of a tube compressor on, just kind of keep some things even. So this is kind of dry without any processing. We'll listen to it. So I put a little bit of EQ. Now you can put just a little bit of the tube compressor on. Let's put just a little bit of reverence, and the reverence that I'm using here, just the LA Studio, which is the default. So listening to that kind of in context again.
Not a sound, tell me why something's wrong, we can't go on living a lie.
So I see lots of people have, 16 different inserts, and, it's always, to me, like seeing the guitar player that has 30 pedals and they're all kind of fighting each other. And I have this pedal to do this and this to do this, and the interaction between those can often be problematic, but, just try to keep it simple, maybe a little delay, a little reverb, not too much, and you should be in good shape. Okay, so we have a question. Use Cubase 12 Pro. Is it possible to change the label field properties in the MIDI remote section when you make your remote. Okay, so let's say if I, and I think this came in 1205. So let's say if I wanted to come over here to the MIDI remote, and I will come over here. So I don't have any label fields, but I'm going to just kind of scroll down here. Then that there was a specific label field. Let me just see if I. Thought that there was a label field in here that we could use. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure that when we come over that there is, let me just see if I start with a brand new one. All right, so see if we could just kind of build one from scratch if we get. Yeah, so I thought it was a label field in here, but if you want to email me, I could have an answer for Friday's live stream. Sorry about that. I'm having a bit of a brain cramp. First day back from holidays. But I think once you have the label field that you should be able to kind of type it in and change that. And if it comes to me later, I'll see if I can remember. All right, wonderful to see Michael Pierce on. Just glad to be connected on LinkedIn with you. All right, so we have Chris from Bremen, Germany. Thanks for being on. Driven through Bremen. All right, so we have a question. In Cubase 12 Pro, can automation trim run via hardware fader? Avid S1 fader would be set to 0 dB in trim mode, so you could use only the fader to trim the overall channel volumes. All right, so let's say I We'll come over here. Let's do a new project. Okay, and I'll just have some random automation. Let me just take it out of. Okay, so let's say I have my automation here. And I will just come to my fader and I'll control this with my hardware. So I'm going to go to my automation panel, which you could open by hitting F6. And let's just put this into trim mode. So now when I automate, I'm just going to move the fader overall, and you can see that it's just going to trim down. So we can see that we'll have the original automation and then with the trim. So we can see that that is just kind of carried down. And then if you wanted to, you could just say, let's freeze trim automation on a selected track. And then we could see that the automation has been trimmed down from where it was. So just enable trim automation right from here. And then whatever source you're using, whether it's a physical fader like I'm using on my CC121, you should be able to just do trim automation and kind of where you were before the trim, where you were after the trim. So you could see, so this is after the trim automation, so moving it down, and before where the original automation was. All right, so we have Doug checking in from Tampa. Thanks for joining us. And we have PZ136 wishing everyone a happy new year. We have Anthony Lanius checking in from Bell Buckle, Tennessee. Thanks for joining. All right, so we have a question. Hi, is there a way to make the metronome not accent the first beat but have all the clicks the same like an old-time metronome? So let's say if we have our click track going on here, all we have to do is go to the metronome setup. So go to your transport and go to metronome setup, and then you'll see like the click patterns. So as soon as you come over here, you could, or even if we now, where we see our, well, we could extend this over to the right here. And we'll see like our click pattern here. You could just double click. And now if you want it all to be the same, so if you just go to your click patterns, that will be, or if you wanted to have, or to be all the same without an accent, or if you wanted to mute the one. So all you have to do is just kind of extend over just to the right. If you come here, extend that over, then you'll see the click pattern. You could double click in there and then choose to have an accent or not. All right. So we see Lawrence Koch. Welcome everyone. Wishing everyone Happy New Year from Rhode Island. Thanks for joining us, Lawrence. All right. And Matt Elston wishing everyone Happy New Year from London. All right. All right, so question, could you please show us how to make a drum score using the drum map so it produces standard drum score? Okay. I'll just come over here, program a generic beat. Okay, so I'm going to all right, and let's say I'll just throw in some hi-hats real quick. Okay, so now let's say we want to look at this in score editor. We may see something. All right, and I'll just copy this a couple times. Okay, so let's go to our drum map here. So let's say we'll go to our drum map setup. So let's say I want my bass drum to be this. We'll do our display note on F3. Let's say our snare, we want it to be on C4. And let's say our hi-hat, okay, so we've now come over here. So let's just, I haven't done this in a long time, but let's come over to, and we may be even able to use preset. Let me just see if there's preference for the for drum notation in here. Just look through here one more time. Yeah, I mean, there's kind of a correlation, and I'll see if I can get this for Fridays. I'll make a note to myself. But with the actual drum map, so let's see if I do it as a GM map, and then we edit. So I'm not sure if we need to set it up as okay. So let's say so. Then if we come over here, you could just let me see if we. Let's put this into polyphonic voice. So there, that's how you could do it. So, so you want to go to under options to score drum map, then use the score drum map. You could choose to not beam the subgroups under polyphonic. You want to choose polyphonic and then make sure that we have voice 2 by default, which will be the hi-hats. Then we could have those automatically have their voices, and we could set that to be up or down. So that's how you could do it. Sorry, it took me a while to get there. All right, wonderful to see Michael Teens from Weatherford, Texas online. All right, John Costigan says, if you learn something, please hit the like button as it keeps the live stream in business. That's a great point. All right, so we have AK27 from Frisco, Texas, first time here. So welcome, and feel free to ask any questions. All right, wonderful to see Sable Winters. We missed you on the last Zoom meetup. We're all anxious to see what you got from from your new gadgets over the holidays, Sable. So we look forward to the end of January Zoom meetup. All right, wonderful to see Danielle Tokan on. She's back from Kiev in Romania. We hope you were safe while you were in Kiev. All right, great to see Kerwin Young from Atlanta on. Wishing everyone a happy new year. All right, so we see from Ed Pacheco question. I purchased a Launch Key 61, and when I hit the B key, it goes octave higher, maybe an octave higher. Is there a way to fix that? So check to see if Cubase will accept whatever kind of MIDI messages are coming in. Go to the MIDI or instrument track and come over here and go to MIDI inserts. And you want to go to MIDI monitor. So when you come here, just hit the note and see what note your MIDI keyboard is transmitting. So if you go and it seems like it's transmitting the wrong note, then it's something in the controller that's being transmitted to Cubase. And it's probably best to fix it in the controller. So if it doesn't seem like it's transmitting the right note or the note is split somehow in the MIDI controller, so make sure that this particular, the note that you hit seems like it's the correct note here. So if I start with C1, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, etc., that we could see like the correct octave. So if your MIDI controller is transmitting the wrong octave on a particular note, then it would probably best to actually fix that in the MIDI controller itself. So let us know if what you're seeing there in the MIDI monitor, Ed. All right, so we have a question from PZ136. Says my UR824 does not show up in Cubase, but it works in Groove Agent, Machine, etc. How long does support take to respond? I have the license issue with the UR24 1/2. So make sure that it's showing up when you go to your device setup. If it's being seen by the operating system, make sure that you go to your audio system and that you so go to Studio menu to Studio Setup. And then make sure that you see the ASIO driver is set for the Steinberg UR824. You should just see it listed directly there. So if that is set to something else, then it won't see the UR824 and Cubase won't be able to access it because it could be looking. The audio stream may be set to somewhere else. So maybe if the computer was turned on, you ran Cubase without the interface turned on, it may have switched to another audio interface. So if you could let us know if you go to the audio system, if you actually see the Steinberg UR824 available there and listed there, and switch it to there. All right, and we have Mark Kiambo wishing everyone a happy new year from Nairobi. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so we have a question from Rob from Florida. Says, what does this message mean? Is there a correction that can be made? It says, real-time algorithm has been deactivated because pitch or stretch factor lies outside the limits of the current preset. I get it when I open a project. So sometimes if you've done very audio editing on a particular project, so usually very audio, the detection that it uses for doing vocal. So let me just drop a vocal file in here. So we see that we are in this particular algorithm, but now when we go to Very Audio, that Very Audio will use a different algorithm for its detection. So one thing that you could do is, see if you have, or if you're not using Very Audio, maybe you could switch the algorithm for an audio file that might be using Very Audio, or if you've done the Very Audio edits, because generally it's the real time is what's used for Very Audio. So you might just have to go into select a particular file and adjust the algorithm there. Okay. All right. So we have from PZ136, it says, Amped Electra is not showing up as licensed, but is there in my products. Any ideas? So Amped Electra, one thing that sometimes people miss is that when we go to add an instrument track, that a lot of instruments may not show up as separate instruments, but rather an instrument that plays back through Howling and Sonic SE. So when you come over here, we could just see, okay, my Amped Electra shows up inside of Howling and Sonic. And at that point, when you go to the Amped Electra, that we can now play it, and we could have all the different playback information just directly right there. So as we play back, so give that a shot and let me know if you see it inside of Howling and Sonic SE3. All right, let me just jump back to this project. Thanks for all the great questions so far. Okay. All right, so we see, hey Greg, on the control room, is it possible to do a stereo/mono switch on a headphone mix? So I think what we could do is, so let's say if we have a headphone mix here, so let's say we have a Q mix. So say we go to our vocal Q mix here, and now I want to go to inserts. I think if we go to mix convert, so if we go come over here, we could just say to mix convert, we could just say we want to do stereo to mono. So we could just activate and deactivate a mix convert plugin on the headphone mix. So if you want to go from, from stereo to mono, you could just turn on and off the plugin. So try using, go to the particular Q mix that you want for the headphones, then click on inserts, go to the mix convert plugin, and then it'll probably show as like stereo to stereo, but then you could just have that set to mono, and then you could turn on and off the plugin, and you could do it without the plugin open, that you could just bypass the particular plugin right there, and that will take it from stereo to mono, stereo, mono. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, great to see Spike Williams from Wales. All right, and Spike Williams is checking in from a wet Wales. So, all right, so we have a question. How do I export custom macros and key commands for use on a second PC? So if you go to Edit, to Profile Manager, export your profile on the computer with all the macros and key commands that you want. go to the second computer and import the same profile. So you could email the file to yourself or put it on a USB flash drive. So once again, go to Edit, Profile Manager, and this will carry over preferences, key commands, user presets, global workspaces, etc. So export it and then import it. So I took all my preferences and key commands from my previous computer, and that's what I'm using as my profile. All right, so we see a question from Georgios. Says, hi Greg, Happy New Year. Question about the algorithms. When I use a different algorithm in Very Audio, I choose to pitch one. As soon as I click something, it automatically goes back to standard solo. So, that is the algorithm that's used for Very Audio. It's not only for the playback processing, but it's also an integral part of the pitch and segment detection as well. So that's, once you are utilizing Very Audio, it's going to use that particular algorithm. So that's kind of by design. All right, so we see a question from LD Williams. For some reason, my metronome has been coming in about a half bar late. I don't understand how to fix it. So let me know if it's playing late all of the time. So let's say if we're... So, if it's constantly coming in late, or if it is, so like there, when we do record, we have kind of a pre-count. So we could have, let me know if it's always 2 bars late or if it just takes time to count in. Now, if we have a lot of plugins on, let's say if we come to, if there are lots of plugins on a particular track that have latency. So let's say if I had multiple multi-band compressors, and I had these in my project, that each of these plugins will have latency built in. And so if you, now, as soon as I hit the space bar, it'll say 3, 2, 1, that it will be delayed. So if I kind of count down 3, 2, 1, now that it's delayed that way. And that's just because of the plugins that are on and active within the session. So if you wanted plugins for that, one thing you could do is to activate the delay compensation. And even if you had plugins that were, impose a lot of latency, this would bypass high latency plugins for you. And so you could try to turn that off. But let me know if it's always 2 bars late or if it's just when you play, you don't hear it initially and it takes a while for it to kind of catch up. That information would be helpful. All right, so we see, is it possible to change the names in the MIDI remote, label field properties? An example, in MIDI remote, I have quick controls. I want to name the send, so I know that it is the send. All right, so let's take a look at this again. So we'll come over here. So So I'll just go to the mapping assistant and I'll just say selected track. Let's come over here to send slots. All right. So I think that the icon might be fixed. So we come here, we can see kind of the sends for the label, but there is some way to put a label on it. I'm just yeah, but so I'm just kind of blanking on, but there is like a label box. I forget how to do it. It was added in 12.5, and then you could put a label on different ones. I'll just try it again and see if I can trigger my memory. Yeah, so I will see if I can remember how to do it for Friday's live stream. I'll make a note for that. Sorry about that. All right, so we have a question from Ariana Atti. Is there a regular schedule for these sessions? If so, when are they? So we usually do them 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern time on Tuesdays and Fridays, unless like we had a little break for holidays, but generally it's Tuesdays and Fridays at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern time. All right, so we see a question. Any chance of using the GPU for convolution effects or like? So, some of the issues are, there is one company that's working on GPU audio, and they seem to, were having a bunch of stuff released a couple months ago, and then I really haven't heard much of it. So there are some companies, I know Steinberg's been doing some research into it. I think the latency can be quite high, and also the different GPU models, unlike a standard CPU, you might, if you offloaded everything to a GPU and then the customer doesn't have a compatible GPU for that it's much easier to kind of do stuff on the computer's processor, that everyone has a processor, but not everyone has a common GPU. So, but I know that there are companies working on it. Okay, Michael Teams wants people to whack the like button. My chat field just jumped. Let me just catch up. right, so we see from a question, I'm currently on YouTube. Where's the Cubase Hangout? So this is the Hangout that you're on. If you're typing into the chat field, that's what it is. Okay, so you see from Jesse Carmichael, just a clarification. It says, yes, I have a key command for that particular toggle between step and ramp, but unfortunately that isn't changing the curve type. Okay, so let's say if we're on this particular event, all right, so let's say we come to, let's say, modulation. All right, so I'm not sure if you wanted to switch between the different, like sine, triangle, square wave, stuff like that. So let me just come over here. So let's say if we go to our line tool, all right, so let's just set key command. Or the draw, is it? All right, so let's look at our tools. Okay, so okay, so let's say if we come here, I think we hit F10, that will take us to, let's say, the next tool. And let me just see if there's a way by key commands to switch between those. Let me just see if it's... Yeah, so it looks like you have to manually switch between the different line tools here. But I'll play around with it more, Jesse, if you want to email me. And I could see if we could do that from some kind of macro or key command for you. All right, we have Razel checking in from Denmark. Thanks for being on. All right, so we have Terry Gray checking in from a snowy Minneapolis, Minnesota. I saw parts of Minneapolis on a weather channel this morning. Looks like you guys are going to having typical Minneapolis weather. All right, so we have Hayes just asking to show some club bangers, please. So if you have particular question, just let me know. I'd be happy to show you how you could maybe do something to get a club banger. All right, so you just see from Drazi Eternal says, I left and came back. Is that my answer? And it doesn't look like it yet. So don't remember your question, but maybe if you want to re-ask the question in case I missed it. All right, so we have a question from Sable Winters. I've been playing around with Retrolog 2 and considering adding pigments for or going straight to Omnisphere. Any feedback on functional comparisons? So I would say that you get a tremendous amount of like analog synth sounds out of Retrolog, and that make sure that you've reached the end of what you could do with Retrolog, maybe before investing in other instruments, because it is incredibly capable instrument. I know you got the if I remember, you got the Absolute collection, so there's a zillion sounds in there, and that you probably wouldn't need to go outside between, especially diving into howling and some. All right, so a question: does anyone know how to make the effects in Sends output in stereo, so it's possible to pan the track? Effects in Send seem to prevent stereo panning while mixing. Thanks. Okay, so make sure that your effect is that when you add the effect, that it's actually in stereo. So let's say we have a stereo drum loop here. So I'm going to add a stereo. I'm going to add an effects channel, and we're going to make sure that it's stereo. So now when I come here, so let me just make sure I add it to the selected track. All right, so now I come to the track, and then as we pan, now you could also have this automatically, when you go to like the effects channel, you can automatically pan the effects send as well, but you should be able to have your effects and be able to pan regardless, or if you wanted that to automatically follow, so you shouldn't have any problems panning with the stereo effect. And I see that you're on version 10, but shouldn't matter. All right, so you just see a question. Hi, Greg. Will the CC121 be continued for sale this year or next year? It was discontinued, I think, in 2020, towards the end of 2020. So I haven't heard of any plans to bring it back. I think that there was, part shortages that prevented it from being continued to be manufactured. All right. So I just see a question from All About Everything. I'm currently using Cubase 11 Pro. Is the upgrade to 12 worth it? So I think for the, there's a lot of amazing stuff that came in 12. So the new licensing system. You also have new plugins. You're going to have like the multi-track free warp on the project window, and hundreds of other little things that make it a great upgrade. So definitely worth it. All right, so we see I see a comment from Watt says upgrade is an issue because of the manager, which doesn't transfer all plugins. So yeah, so you should it shouldn't affect any of your particular plugins. So I'm not sure when you say it doesn't transfer all plugins, it kind of works the same way, but some of the plugins still utilize the older licensing scheme of the e-licenser, and not all have transitioned to new ones, but they're still available to work. All right. So you see from Patrick Manuel A says, "Hi Greg, hope you enjoyed your Xmas and Merry New Year with your family. Can you show us how to select notes, which I sent you a pic on Facebook? Hope you remember that." So I think just kind of going back through some of the Facebook messages, I had some time off, but I think you want to do something like select every third note in a bar, something like that. So I think I came up with a combination of like a macro and a logical editor to do this. So I'll just come over here. Let's just create a couple. Sorry about that. All right. All right. So let's say we want to select every third note in a bar. Okay. So I'll just copy. And I'll just add some. All right. So if we wanted to select every third note in a bar, we could, if I set this particular macro up. So let's say I will come to, let's get to my logical editor. All right. So, and I kind of base this on the cycle marker. So I put a cycle marker around a particular, for one measure. And so now we can say, let's select every third note within this one measure. So I come here, and then, so let's say I wanted to take these particular notes, and it's not a count of every third note going throughout the project, but every third note within the measure, if I remembered correctly. So let's say I wanted to select every third note and drop the velocity by 20. So I'm going to come over here and we'll say transform, and we'll say value 2, subtract 20. All right, so I set up a condition of type is equal to note, and we chose position is inside cycle and PPQ. And then we can say last event, every other event counter is 3. So that way it's only going to do the third note within the bars. And now we chose to drop this by 20. So I'll come there, and now every third note is dropped by a velocity of 20. Now, what I made a macro to do is I'm going to save this as a preset. And we could just move this over if we wanted to and just choose to do it again. So, but the only way for me that I found to do it, and there may be, other people are smarter than me, is to kind of move this. So I created a macro to allow us to do this. So the macro I created, let's come over here to key commands, and let's go to macros. I think I just called it select third note in measure. So I switched the bar type to grid, and then we could nudge the selection to the right. So as I would run this particular macro, so again, it's edit, grid type is to bar. So I select one bar at a time, and you may have to just run this macro multiple times. And then we can say loop range. Then, so we're going to set it to a bar. Then we're going to nudge the loop range over to the right, and that will nudge it over one bar. And then we'll process that logical editor preset. So, and I think my version just had it selected every third note. So if I run the macro, I'll come here. We'll see that the left and right locators, which are certainly currently set around measures 3 and 4, that we could just say we'll select. Let me just close this. Let me make that the active part. Select third note in measure. So this will select it. So as we do that, we could just simply select the third notes in every single measure. And then, so if we start and then kind of do the processing. So again, once that is selected, go to macros, select third note in measure. So this will select the third note in that particular measure. I run the macro again, and then we could do whatever processing we wanted to within the logical editor preset. So again, select third note in the next measure. So every third note here, again, is selected. And then you could do, so again, in the logical editor, come over to, so you could transform it if you want, or select type is equal to note, position is inside the cycle, and the last event, every other event counter set to 3. Go to the macro, go to your key commands, and at this point you could say edit grid type is to bar, so if your grid is set to a different value, and then you could nudge the loop range to the right, and then process that logical editor preset. And then I think that will do what you want, Patrick. So let me know if that is helpful. All right, so he's just see from what he just asked my tracks are running the FX through send or playing back a mono when using the effects on sends instead of insert. So again, make sure that when you go to add an effects channel, that its configuration is set to stereo. If this is set to mono, then as we would play back, the effect would be in mono as opposed to stereo. So check the configuration of when you go to add the effects channel, that the configuration here is set to stereo and that the audio outputs are also set to stereo. All right, so we see from Chris Hallam from Athens, Georgia. Does anyone know the level of flexibility in the macros page of IC Pro? Can I add my own macros, change the order in which they appear and on which page, etc.? So yeah, I believe it's completely kind of user configurable, so you could have your macros kind of show up anywhere that you want, and so you could customize it to organize your macros as you see fit. All right, so we see Michael Teams is granted my family, myself 1 gallon of Celebration ice cream. Sounds great. Thank you so much. Hope you had a wonderful holiday, Michael, for you and your wife. All right, so Tom asked from Belgium, use pedals as effects sometimes as external effects in Cubase 12 and sometimes in my external synth chain. So I swap output cable workaround for the FX output of the pedal. All right, so it says I use pedals as effects, sometimes as external effects in Cubase 12 and sometimes in my external synth chain. So I swap input cable as a workaround for the effects output of the pedal. Any workaround for the effects output of the pedal. So what you might be able to do, so if you're using kind of the same hardware effect, you might have to reconfigure it in the audio connections. But once you have kind of like your external instruments here, so let's say, let's say, I have a distressor. Once you have it kind of configured for the IO options, try saving it as add to favorites. So, and then if we come over here, so let's go ahead and remove that. So let's say we go to our external effects, we go to favorites, and we'll just say distressor, and then that way all the routings can be configured. So, but if you're using kind of the same processing, you might have to, record it through or just try simply saving it as a favorite. All right, just reading through comments. Thanks for all the great questions from everyone. And if you've learned a new tip or trick, make sure you do hit the like button. So I just see, so no issues on FXNs with Cubase 12. Maybe this is a glitch on 10. So it wasn't a glitch on 10. So it's pretty sure that works as expected. All right, so this is going back to Toon's question about the using the pedals. Can't see the inputs because used by external effect. Of course, I can make the two presets, but fast swapping because have more than one pedal. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of the a limitation of hardware itself that is causing that. But try saving it as a favorite, and you might be able to work around it. But once you kind of have it in the external effects, you could render in place and render the external effect disconnected, and use it for other elements as well. All right, so you just see from Patrick says on Cubase 13 we need MIDI features like selecting every second note, every third note, and other options like selecting notes on chord, major, minor, third. Like just click and select. The MLE takes time to do. So make once you save presets, it's really easy to use that. There is selecting every second and third note presets already in as presets in the logical editor. So so every time that you make a particular function, just simply save it as a preset, and then you have all of your logical editor presets already done. All right. Okay, reading through comments here. All right, so we have Tony Hoodspeth checking in, wishing everyone a happy new year from Germany. All right, we see Brian Sawyer from Beulahville, North Carolina. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we have a question. Greg, do composers always do mid-side EQ all the time for every music they make? Because sometimes I feel just leaving things panned right sounds great, but do I need it always? I'm wondering. So there's nothing that you always need to do in a music production. So, think of each project as presenting unique opportunities. And I think that people using the same methods for every single solution kind of leads to a lot of music sounding very similar. So take each project with with a new fresh approach and try to do what's needed for the particular project, as opposed to just using a formula of tricks. So a lot of people don't do mid-side EQ at all, and have made an entire great living without ever using it. So, all right, so we have Monos, who's happy to join today's live stream. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we have Jackshot Records checking in from British Columbia. It's a full day in the studio for him, so it sounds like a good way to start off the new year. Thanks for joining us. See, Alexander Plasko is reminiscing about the old days of supporting multiple dongles where you got a different parallel port dongle for different plugins, if he remembers. So yeah, So you could always get an extension cable and just put it on the floor. That's easy solution in the old day. All right, so we have a question. Glad to be here. First time. How do I send an entire project to another studio? I tried to, but when he received it, he said the vocals weren't lined up. So really kind of like for a multi-track project, the easiest way to do it is to, take the entire project and go to export audio mixdown. You could select multiple. And at this point, you could just select all of your different audio, all of your different instrument tracks. Set the left, before we do this, set the left and right locators around the entire project. So you could select all the events and hit the letter P. And that will set the left and right locators. Again, go to File, to Export Audio Mixdown. Click on Multiple. And at this point, you could select all your audio channels, all your virtual instruments. They'll all be rendered as equal length audio files. So you could choose to include different effects if you wanted to. And then this will make everything equal length so that anyone using any other system can install, can import all the files and start them at the same time, and it'll play back. All right, so you see from Patrick, Greg, sometimes MIDI logical editor not selecting notes in key editor, but if I use the same options inside drum editor, it's selecting notes. But why and what's the reason? So I'm not sure, if you have a specific logical editor, I'm probably not going to go through and try to recreate that. But it could be that if you have, one difference that it could be is if you already have notes selected in the key editor, that if you have notes selected in the key editor and run a logical editor, it's going to run it on the selected notes. But if you have the key edit window active, so like if I wanted to do a logical editor and my project window is the active window, it may not do anything until the active window is set to the lower zone. And then if I do a logical editor and only one MIDI note is selected, it's only going to apply to that one particular MIDI note, whereas if no notes are selected, it would apply to everything. So I think that they would function the same way, but you might have something, the wrong window focus set. So you might have the wrong Windows focus set incorrectly, or you might have just, one note, let's say down here, that's selected, and you do this and it doesn't do what you expect on these notes because you told it to only do it on this selected note. So check your focus controls and make sure that that the key editor window is the active window and that no notes are selected. But I haven't found any difference between the two, but if you have a particular logical editor function that you find works differently, please feel free to send it to me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, so just see a question. I also recorded some vocals, but when I played back, I hear nothing. I saw a message saying audio recording detected. So, it could be that when you do a recording, if the track, Like, so say if I come here and I recorded audio on this particular track. So I record, and then we go back to listen to it. Check to make sure that you don't have record enable and monitor still engaged. Otherwise, it might not play back. You'll play back, but you might not hear it because it's looking for the incoming signal. So make sure after you record that you actually have the monitor disabled, and that way the track can play back that you recorded, as opposed to the particular, instead of listening for an incoming monitor signal. And there's preferences that you could set for this as well. So if you go to your preferences and under VST, you could try setting your auto monitoring style. I prefer tape machine style myself. And, so check to make sure that you're not already set, that you're still not in monitor, that monitoring is enabled, looking so that you can hear what you're recording as opposed to what you did record. All right, so we have a question from Danielle Mitchell. Says, hi and Happy New Year. Can I ask about the feature in Cubase 12 that allows you to completely remove specific instruments so that only the voice is left in an audio file, please? So yeah, let's go ahead and take a look. We'll do a new project. Okay, so let's say if we're here and I want to now, we'll just... So say we want to remove the voice. So what we could do is utilize the spectral layers 1. So when we come here, we'll see extensions and we'll say spectral layers. So now we're going to go, and this is a free, you get spectral layers 1 with Cubase. We go to layer, and then we could just choose to unmix vocals. And now at this point, we will just come over. So this is almost, I often refer to this as taking the eggs out of a cake after it's been baked. All right, so now if we wanted to come over here, we'll just listen to. So this is kind of broken it down. So if I wanted to drag the vocal out as an audio file, we could just do it right from there. And now we could see. So that's how you do it. So again, just go to, you'll see extensions here, go to spectral layers and go to layer, unmix vocals, and then it'll create a layer in the right hand side. Then you can just drag it out and separate the vocal from the backing track. All right, we're reading through more comments. Thanks for all the great questions. Hope everyone's learned a new tip and trick. And if you have, make sure you do hit the like button. All right. So we see a question from Perry Michael Allen. Question: after setting up ducking with compressor, can transfer the compressor to offline processing. Plug-in meters don't respond, just checking. So I don't think it's going to work on the offline processing. But again, if you just render in place, because once you do the offline processing, that's not necessarily carried over into the routing. I don't think. I will check just to make sure. All right, so let's say if I wanted to take this file and do offline processing, so I'll just go to my direct offline processing. Let's go to plugins and say, okay, we'll go to our compressor. So this is where we can't necessarily set the sidechain input here. So, so that's why it's not carried over. But again, if it's part of the mix, so let's come over here to, let's say to this particular track, and we go to the mix. If you want it applied to the track, so we have that going to the kick, just come over and, because the offline processing doesn't take into account, it's just processing the file, but it's not taking into account the other tracks. But again, if you do the render in place, since those settings are taken into account, that, and if I don't hit close this time, that we'll see that the processing will, that the sidechaining will be processed onto the particular file, just like that. And if you wanted to, replace that particular event, so let's say I have the track selected, and we go to edit, to render in place, and we choose to remove the source track. So if I come there, then it's just as if you did, and we look at it, then it's, just as if you rendered it, and you get to the kind of the same area, but there's no pathway for the sidechain input with direct offline processing. It can't be defined because it's not contingent upon any of the other routing. All right, so you see question. Hello, everyone. I made my own drum preset for metal music with my samples in Groove Agent SE. The samples only take up 700 megabytes. Why does it sound crack at maximum buffer value? All right, so let's say go to add, let's say Groove Agent SE, and we have the kit. So one thing I would do is when you go to options, is you'll see your preload memory. Try increasing that because you might be artificially choking. So just come over to options and max preload memory because you might be kind of throttling the amount of memory. So it might be like 1200 megabytes for the whole kit, and you might be using 700 megabytes of it. So try increasing your maximum preload, and that might give up some resources for you to have better CPU utilization. All right, so we see from Patrick says, Greg, we need comping to work on vocals as the way it does for MIDI because if I stopped recording, I cannot capture vocals. So can Cubase make it done? All right, so maybe, Patrick, if you could say what it doesn't do for... I know that MIDI, we could stack different MIDI notes together, but, for audio, it's going to be kind of one audio source at a time. So let's say if I just wanted to come here. But, MIDI, you could choose to kind of like layer different MIDI notes on top of each other. And if you wanted to do something similar, like if you were, one thing you could do if you wanted to like build up kind of different ideas and layers. So let's say I am comping this. All right, so say I'm recording. So say if we wanted to have, like if we wanted to create like maybe like gang background vocals or a lot of layers, and we just want them to kind of be cycled over and over again to create kind of, the multiple people singing together. So let's say we do 8 takes here. All you have to do now is we go to lanes. We could select the lanes and right click, and we can say create tracks from lanes. And now at this point, we could just choose to have lanes, or now we could have all the different recordings automatically spread out to different tracks. But if you could let me know like what you want that's in the MIDI comping that's not in the audio, I'd be happy to kind of, be happy to see if I'm misunderstanding. But I would say it's a pretty typical comping vocal paradigm that many people love. I just see from Kamal Powell saying, bro, your voice is so deep. Sorry, just what my voice is. I have a little bit of a cold I'm getting over from the holidays, but... And see, did I put a low pass filter on my voice? No, just straight into the microphone into... I have a high pass filter on the mixer for my voice, so I can make it even lower if I wanted to. All right, so we have a question. Does Cubase IC Remote app have version for Android? Is one expected? So there was an early version, but kind of at the time there's so much fragmentation on Android devices, it was pulled. So I'm not sure. I haven't had discussions on if there's plans for Android version of IC Pro coming, but I'll see if I could find out. All right, so we see question. I'm having an issue with Isotope 10. I can resize the plugin window, but actually the modules and letters do not change size. It's all very small. How can I make it bigger? Thanks. So it could really depend on if that is set up for high DPI, but if it's kind of a scaling issue, if you're on Windows, the one thing you could try, and there's probably a limitation of the plugin itself, but if you go to, on Windows, if you go to General, you'll see high DPI scalings. And then you'll see scaling where you can make it 125, 150% of the size. So, but it's probably a high DPI issue with the particular plugin. So I would check with Isotope on that and see if they but try the different, I think it's going to be a high DPI issue with a particular plugin. All right, wonderful to see Tim Weinheimer on from Mission Viejo, California. Thanks for joining us. All right, Michael Teams wants people to smash the like button. All right, my chat field jumped on me. Let me see if I can find back where I was. All right. All right, so we see from Bradley live streams, Akai MPK mini controller. How can I be sure my drum map in Cubase matches the keys pads on the MIDI controller in Cubase, i.e. C2 reads high, middle, tom in Cubase, but when I play C2, nothing is played. Check as we go to, let's say we go to an instrument track here. So always check to make sure that you're transmitting the what MIDI note you're transmitting is what you think you're transmitting is actually what you're transmitting. So again, go to your MIDI monitor, and then as you hit the drum pads, make sure that that it's the particular notes that you think it is. So I'm just hitting some drum pads here on my MIDI controller. So make sure that that is the particular pad. Now, if you say, okay, it's not the right sounds, but I want this pad to match up to this, so realize that you have 16 notes here, but you have 8 banks of 16 notes, so you have 128 different MIDI notes. But if you click on this little icon, you could right-click on a pad, and then you could just say edit learn MIDI trigger note. So you could say, I want this pad to play this particular, to play when this MIDI note is hit. So again, click right here and make sure that then you can see the edit learn trigger note, but go to the MIDI monitor and make sure that it is transmitting the right pad, because you may have different octave keys to transmit different drum sounds. All right, so we see from question and where to write a question to make it clear on the stream. So, if it's a more involved question, you could send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de, or you could just simply ask it in the particular chat field. And I realize that there could be a character limitation of 200 characters. So if you need to spread it across multiple, if you need to spread it across multiple questions, you could do that, or send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, we have a question from Ed Rugman. Hi, Greg. In direct offline processing, when I have effects applied to multiple events, why does the process list show plugins in alphabetical order and not allow in a draggable process order like when selected individually? All right, so let me just import some audio files here. All right, and I'll just separate these. Okay, so let's say I do an offline process. Okay, so I'm going to now come over here and go to our direct offline processing. So I have multiple files selected. I'll come here. Let's throw mono delay on. And let's do a reverb. Okay, so now as we play. Okay, and I'm going to throw in one other plugin. Maybe a dual filter. Okay, so. Okay, so the question, why does the process list show plugins in alphabetical order and not allow in a draggable process order, like when selected individually? So here, this is the order that I did the plugins in. So it doesn't look like it's applied alphabetically, so that's why I did the dual filter last. So this is the order of the process. And not allowed in a draggable process order, like when selected individually. So if I wanted to change the order, so let's say if I select the one file, that we could then change the order. Let's see if it does it for. So it looks like once you select an individual file, that you could then change the order as you want. But let me know, Ed, if I'm doing something different. But those were all applied, but maybe you have to just individually select to change the order. All right, so we have Julian just ask, is Julian from Paris here? Do you know if it's possible to key command theft quantize function. I can't find a shortcut in the key commands window. Thanks. So, if you wanted to quantize, so let me just, okay, so if it's, just quantizing, is just the letter Q. So let's say, okay, I want to quantize these to quarter notes. We just randomly move some of these. All right, so now if I have it set to Q, we could quantize to quarter notes. So that's the normal, and maybe it's the soft quantize, like the iterative quantize. So if it is dealing with the iterative quantize, soft quantize on off, let's look for that in key commands. And then you could just use the soft quantize on and off there as a key command. But let me know if that is helpful, and then you could turn that on and off. But I'm not sure what the theft quantize function is. And I realize it could be a victim of translation. All right, wonderful to see Gerald Ely on from Martinez, California. All right, so we have a question from Jazzy Lomel. I have a project that has a guitar, bass, and synth and vocals, and they all out of time or play too fast or too slow on each track, all to a click track. Can you show me how to fix this? So what I would do, if you don't know, let's just delete these. All right, so I'm just going to take everything out of musical mode. So let's say we have our drums here. And let me just find... And let me just... Okay, so let's say we have like, 3 different files that are all completely different tempos. All right, so if they are loops, what you could do is make, they probably will have, different events, and you could just place them all into musical mode. So as we come over here, we could now just take, our different events here and say, okay, as we listen to this, you know. Now, if they are just kind of so that would be kind of the easiest way if it has a tempo. Excuse me 1 second, just clear my throat. Now, if you have to actually figure out kind of if you don't know what the original tempo of the files is, one of the things that you could do is, have Cubase do a tempo detection. So say, okay, I want to do, or you could do a tempo detection, or just come here and count the beats. 2, 2, 3, 4. So we can say, okay, this is 8 beats a minute. So we could say, okay, when we go to our beat calculator, we could say, okay, I counted 8 beats. And that will tell you that's 101.5 tempo beats per minute. Okay, so now we could go into our pool window, which is, we just go to media to open pool window, and we can say, okay, and we'll see a tempo. So we can say that's 101.5. So when we come to this, I could count the number of beats in this bass. So we'll say maybe that's 16 beats a minute. So, or that's 16 beats. So we will again come to the beat calculator and say this is 16 beats. And we say, okay, that's 140. So you could find the tempo. And then once it has a common tempo, once you know what the tempo is of all the files, then place it into musical mode. And then you could just have your different elements line up. So find a tempo, and you could do that if it's a longer file. You could go to tempo detection. And then once you figured out what the tempo is of the file, at that point, go to your audio, to advanced, and set definition from tempo, and that could embed the tempo for you automatically. So. All right, so we see from PC 136 says restart it to PC with your 824 turned on. There's no option to select it. It doesn't show only the low latency generic driver. Open desktop synths or other apps. It's available, working fine. So I would try maybe to reinstall the driver just out of curiosity, because maybe it's using maybe it's not using the ASIO driver, or make sure that, because when you're using the UR824 with Cubase, there's also going to be like the UR824 tools that kind of allows you to have more connectivity and more kind of interactivity and more kind of what's the word I'm looking for? More connection options between the two. So make sure that you have that you've installed all of the UR824 tools and not just a driver for it. So there's like a UR824 extension. So make sure you have that installed. All right, going through. All right, so we see from Michael Pierce, I forget, can you use Retrolog as an insert effect as well? Because that would be nuts. What you can do is, let's say I wanted to take this drum loop here. So we'll have this drum loop. So I'm going to open up an instance of Retrolog. So it doesn't work as an insert effect, but you can sidechain into it. So I'm going to add an instrument track of Retrolog. And then I'm going to set up my sidechain input. So once we have the sidechain turned on, you can now kind of have the input sidechain. And at this point, so you could sidechain into it and just kind of set your input and you could do some processing like that through the different filters as well. So you just have to kind of come over here, and I think that so yeah, you could sidechain into Retrolog, but it doesn't work as an insert effect per se. All right, so we see, how do the Montage ModiX Connect plugins work with Cubase? So I think that they will just show up as like a VST editor. So as soon as you, once you have the connection, that I think I don't have them, and unfortunately I don't have any of the hardware, but you would just come over here and then load up the editor in essence, and that would control the hardware. So I think if they show up as VST editors, that's how they would work. I could check with some of my colleagues. All right, so we have a question. Greg, who's the one now that takes decisions on Cubase? What's his previous works? Do you know him? Tell us about who will be there behind on Cubase 13 features. So, there's obviously dozens and dozens of engineers that are working on stuff. They have their own ideas. There's a kind of a marketing manager. Excuse me, let me just clear my voice. There's a marketing manager of Cubase as well, Matthias Kelman. So, he watches these live streams and he gets reports on all the different questions that are asked on the live stream. So, but, they do pay attention, but, sometimes different features may be coming in kind of a bigger scope of features that, maybe like sometimes people want to do something with the remote control, something, making quick controls, and then it's kind of turns into a much larger portfolio of features like the MIDI remote system. But yeah, there's a lot of smart people that are constantly working hard on making great solutions for you. A bunch of smart men and women, based in Hamburg. Okay, so Benny asked a question. I made different folders for effects, verse, delay, guitar effects, and so on in inserts. Want to always start on default, but it doesn't. Can it be fixed? So I assume that you went, Benny, and created a new VST. So when we go to the VST plugin manager, and you've created a new collection. So let's say if we come over here, we say, okay, let's do a new empty collection. So once I've done that and I've created my plugins, okay, so we'll just call this Benny. So say I just will delete these. That now, it will, the next time I restart Cubase and I go to my plugins, that plugin collection will always, so when I go to my inserts here, so let's say if I just go to my audio track and we go to inserts, that this is the collection I just created. So, but when I want to go to my default, will be at top, but you could just select that. And now when I go to a new project, and we go to add an effects track, that I only see the currently active plugin collection. So, but if I go to default, then I could have everything there. So make sure you saved it as a plugin collection. All right, so we see Michael Pierce's soup recipe. So it sounds good. Thanks for sharing, Michael. All right, so a question, how to record in Cubase 12 from the stereo mix in Windows. So generally those two aren't going to be, because Cubase is using a different driver architecture than like your stereo mix in Windows. So, and it's generally a limitation of kind of the Windows sound drivers, which is why we use and have created ASIO over the years. So, what some people will do is just take the audio, the hardware output from their sound card and record it, and physically patch it into their audio interface. So some people do that. There's also different ways of utilizing loopback. So if you have like a UR824, you could enable loopback on your particular interface, and that could allow you to transmit from Cubase into Windows as well. right. Just reading through comments here. All right, so we see question, can Cubase Pro convert scores PDF to MIDI? So there isn't really anything in Cubase that does that. But there are a number of like scanning utilities. So, I think some will even utilize your phone, which can, do kind of like an optical character recognition. Usually by time you do that and go through and find the errors that have been created as a result of the process, that you could, enter into scores manually. So it's not incredibly reliable, kind of doing a PDF to MIDI. So a lot of people were kind of going that way a couple years ago, but we can see that the practical limitations of it caught up with it actually kind of being viable for a lot of people. All right, so we have a question. Can you show how to compress the side channels only of a stereo audio track if possible? So, okay, so let's come over here. I'll just import. I'll just start with the stereo file. So we could kind of do this with dynamic EQ and frequency. So let's say if we wanted to come here to inserts, let's get to EQ, and we can go to frequency. So if we really wanted to, set only particular bands, so let's say, okay, I want 100 hertz. But at this point, we could say we want to, instead of just being stereo, we could go to mid-side, and then we could go to the side and then adjust the dynamics on that particular channel. So let's say if we want to switch over to our dynamic view, you could now just come over here and adjust just the side here. So let's say, okay, you want to go to so that way you could just adjust the mid side and do kind of your dynamics just on if you wanted to compress just the sides there. All right, so question, will Steinberg support the new clap VST format? Is extremely hyped currently. So I haven't heard much of clap since it was initially announced. So I don't think it's a clap VST format. I think it's which I think kind of shows you that VST is really dominant if you call it a clap VST format. So I think that, VST has I didn't really see any features that were in clap that weren't in VST3 already. So and there's only about 200,000 VST plugins already on the market. So I wouldn't necessarily expect it to occur. There's no real benefit to doing it. All right, so we see question, hello, Greg, I did de-essing on a vocal track. How do you remove all the process gain done in that audio track and revert to all original audio? So if you've done, if you did de-essing as an offline process, so it would really depend on how you applied the de-essing. But if you are here and you did, and if you processed the actual file here, you could just say, okay, I want to go to dynamics, and let's say, okay, we did a heavy-handed de-essing on it. So if it was done just like that, you could come over here and just remove the de-esser from the particular file. If you exported the mix down, there's a chance that you still have the original unprocessed file in your audio pool. But if you could tell us exactly how you did the processing, there could be, if you did it with direct offline processing, you could just simply delete the particular processing. If you did it other ways, like if you rendered a file, you may still have the original file in an edits folder, for instance. So, but if you could let us know, Juan, how you de-essed it and how you applied the de-essing, we could probably help you out. Okay, so you see a question. When I open a MIDI region to edit it, the editor opens with the locator reset it at its beginning. Is there a way not to do it to open a region without selecting the locator? Okay, so let me just go to this project here. Okay, so let's say my locator is at measure 5. Okay, so I'm going to double click to open up that. So let's see, there is one preference. All right, so let's see if I go to transport and I turn off use video follows edit mode. So say I go to 5 here, or let's say we're at measure 3, beat 3, I double click. That going into the MIDI editor doesn't affect the actual playback. So when we go to double click here, the playback position, so go to transport and make sure that use video follows edit mode is off. When that's turned on, when I select an event, it'll go to the beginning of the selected event. So try to use video follows edit mode. Try to turn that off, and then the play position won't be affected by an event selection. All right, so guitar play-longs. Hey, everybody, thanks for all the shared information. Question, is there a feature Greg wants to see in a future version of Cubase? I like the lyric track that was put into VST Live. That's one that I've kind of requested for a long time. And I passed on lots of, feature requests that have kind of been, taking into account. I think it's pretty amazing piece of software, and I've been fortunate to grow in my career with it, and it's been a wonderful career watching Cubase develop from like when I first started with Steinberg. The sequencer was the little thing that some guy ran in a corner of the studio, to basically enveloping and replacing a huge tracking facility room, with much better reliability. So I think it's incredible for where it's at. But no particular features. Sometimes when I share features, other competitors, listen in pretty actively and will take them as well. So I won't necessarily give away a lot of other features for people. But I'm really happy with Cubase 12. So. All right. So you see Michael from Coast Mastering. It says, can you help me see the automation better when in a track the automation is offset and off the screen? Let me see if I think I may have gotten an email from Michael from Coast Mastering. Let me see if I could find it quickly during the live stream here. Okay, just looking at the picture here. Bear with me just a second. All right. Okay, so just looking at this picture, how can I get automation points to line up with the volume fader? In this example, sometimes the data is well above the track and uneditable. So kind of looks like maybe automation data is I'm just looking at it on kind of a small screen, Michael. All right, just kind of looking at it here quickly, picture that was sent. Yeah, I'll give you a call like right after this session, Michael. But from the picture, I can't see if it's the same automation data or if it's just or if it's so yeah. If you could let me know if it's the same automation data, so I kind of see like the automation data like this. So I'm not sure if you wanted to, and I see kind of like almost another line directly below it that seems to mimic this shape. So, but I'll try to reach out to you right after the live stream, Michael. Sorry about that. All right. So you see just a question from Daniela Tokan. How can you layer in Cubase? What's the best way, for example? So I'm not sure if you want to layer like audio or MIDI, but if you wanted to, so let's say if we're going to do MIDI stuff, if we start with, let's say just an instrument track, we'll start with Hallian Sonic SE. All right, so let's say, okay, I wanted a, let's say maybe like a Rhodes. So a lot of times you could layer very easily kind of within an instrument. So let's say, okay, we have, so if I wanted to now put like a string patch on top, I could just say, okay, I want section strings. All right. So now this is on MIDI channel 1, and this is on MIDI channel 2, but if I just switch these to MIDI channel 2, And let's say we'll put a little bit of an organ in. So even though this can play 16 independent MIDI channels, I could just put all these stacked. And then if I wanted to adjust the levels, and let's put kind of like an analog synth on there as well. We'll do a synth pad and just do a little motion. So let's say we'll put this in. Let's put a little amped Electra in. So, and then if you say, okay, I want this one to be transposed up an octave, and you could have different effects. And if you wanted to come over and, you know, like when we go to MIDI, we could say, okay, I only want, you know, this to come in on these particular notes and this, so we could create different split points. Sorry about hitting my mic. So that's let me know if that's the kind of layer that you want to do. So, but yeah, using something like Howling and Sonic SE is a great way to do it. All right. So see, are you able to demonstrate spectral layers at all? So, yeah, so really all you have to do is, you know, we showed it a bit earlier with removing the vocal, but let's say if I wanted to take, you know, so really the concept is that, you know, we'll come over, and I think I just had the spectral layers 1 going on now. So yeah, just have the spectral layers 1. All right, so you know what spectral layers allows you to do is we can think of it as, you know, we have our traditional waveform, but you know what we're able to do is to kind of take, you know, what we're looking at as the frequencies, like the low frequencies versus the mid range. And we could see kind of the overall kind of harmonic overtone series. So we can see the overtones in the particular audio file as we look at it here. But you're able to do kind of, you know, some basic frequency, you know, editing. So if you don't want to edit everything out, but you just want to edit particular frequencies, we could come over and just delete particular frequency ranges. So with this, you're able to do kind of more frequency dependent editing. So if you say, okay, now I just wanted to, you know, play that particular frequency range, or be able to select, you know, you could do kind of more elliptical selection. So as you wanted to zoom in, like let's say you accidentally, like, you know, bumped your microphone, like, you know, something like that. You could just take those particular frequencies and delete out different bumps. So instead of deleting kind of everything on your particular, all the frequencies that you're doing here, you could delete particular frequencies that you're working with. So we'll just come over and jump back But, and there's kind of, dedicated spectral layers live streams as well that you could check out from Mike Scheibinger. Does a great job. All right. So you see, hey, Greg, how do I find the keynote of an audio file that I recorded? So if you wanted to find like a particular note, so let's say if you want to, let me just open up one here. There may have some like a bass recording. Often using So let's say if I have like my recording here. So if we want to go to the bass, we can go to, I'm just going to select the recording, and you can do this and figure out, and you could just see what note is actually kind of derived from the bass line here. So you could often just kind of, if it's like a simple part, you could do it. If it's a more complex part, what you could do is just literally drag the event to the chord track, and that will automatically figure out the chords for you as well to give you an idea. So if it's like a simple kind of monophonic source, you could use Very Audio. If not, you could drag the audio event to the chord track, and that will give you the key as well as the overall chords that have been derived from that particular event. All right, so we have Tiago joining us from Brazil. Thanks for joining us. And we have Webza from South Africa. All right, so we have a question. Will Cubase Pro 12 VST show up in Wavelab? So most of the plugins from Cubase Pro 12 are also included in Wavelab. So you could check to see, but there may be some like, the virtual instruments, since Wavelab doesn't do MIDI, won't be carried over, but most of they share a number of the same plugins. See, Jazz Dude says he uses Spectral Layers 1 to extract vocals, sometimes for recreation of old tracks, like the song Running Down That Hill. It's that Kate Bush song. She's always amazing with her work. Okay, so you just see a question. What times are you on per week? So generally we're on Tuesdays and Fridays, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. All right, so we have a question. I remember a story about a show in a large venue that said hearing the classics, Oberheim, Prophet, etc. on a big PA was a sonic experience modern synths can't match. Why could that be? Maybe the modern synths stay in tune too much. I'm just kidding. I think by the time you get into a live concert, I was reading an article someone posted, I think it was 9 Inch Nails, and they're using, Arturia synths live and all amp modelers and no guitar amps, that's probably a lot more common. I think that there's kind of an emotional thing of seeing like, your favorite synthesizer on stage. But, I've seen many times, a very simple guitar amp setup where you have like all these Marshall stacks on stage that are completely empty and are kind of, almost furniture. And it's a simple cabinet that's being, like a simple amplifier that's being used backstage. I've seen that. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. All right, so we have a question. Is there a way to insert multiple dots using drawing tool in audio events? So I think it's if we are doing this. So I think it's intended for kind of one dot per click, which I think makes sense. And then you could adjust accordingly. So it's really, if you really needed like multiple dots, you could just automate, the particular event here. And then you could just use a fader if you wanted to do automation. So, but I think if these are the dots that you're for the volume curves on the events, that it's intended to be kind of a very simple corrective type of function there. All right, so we have Jocko just wishing everyone a happy new year. All right, reading through more comments. Thanks for all the great questions. Hope everyone's learned a new tip or trick. And if you have, make sure that you subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. All right, so we have a question. Hi, and thank you for your effort. I'm having a warning of a dropout every time when I hit record. How can I turn that off? But is there anything I can do? My system is a Mac Pro 2020 All Dante. So if check to see if if you have a Mac Pro 2020, I'm not sure how many. If you're doing Dante, that could be a lot of variables. So I'm not sure if you're doing Dante through like an AIC 128 card, like a PCI card, or you're doing Dante virtual sound card. Also, how many tracks are you recording? So the first thing I would do is try to, raise the buffer. So if you come to your studio setup, try to come over to your control panel and increase the size of your buffer. That'd be the first thing to do. Also, try just recording it with switch the audio interface. So if you want to come over here, we can switch the audio interface to, go to your audio systems, switch it to built-in, and try recording on all the tracks, and it's even if you don't have anything routed, just record, 64 tracks or whatever, and see if it could record that way. I think you shouldn't have any problems recording that way. But, if you have 8 gigabytes of RAM and you're trying to record 128 tracks, then, on a contemporary computer with a lot of, with the operating system taking a lot, that could also be a factor as well. But try switching it to built-in audio. out of curiosity and see if you get the same message and raise the buffers. I would try that. All right, so we have Wilhelm Kampmann saying hello from Germany. Thanks for joining us. All right. So we have a question. Is there any way to separate bass guitar, etc. with spectral layers? So if you have the pro version, you could separate like pianos, bass, drums, vocals, and other, which is often guitar. So the pro version will allow you to separate more instruments. The version that comes with Cubase, the Spectral Layers 1, is designed just to do vocal removal. All right, so Daniela asks, for spectral layers, does this work on dialogue to separate two persons each on one channel? So it's not really designed to distinguish between two different, two different people speaking. I think the algorithm is set up for doing, doing voice as opposed to instruments or drums and bass versus other instruments. But you could definitely, if you run into a situation where two people are speaking, with the full version of Spectral Layers, you could use stuff like selecting by and including the harmonic overtone series that could really help with that. All right, so we just see a question. Is there some improvement in Groove Agent to auto-assign multi-outs to separate tracks channels? I don't think it's too bad in the current implementation, so let's go take a look. A lot of people don't know necessarily how to do it. All right, so I'll just revert. Okay, so, within Groove Agent, there are two different paradigms. So we have kind of the acoustic agent and percussion agent. So let's say if we're doing this and everything is now going out of a stereo output. So everything is being mixed to this stereo output, that all I have to do is go to the mixer and I can say, okay, I want my snare to go out of output 2, my hi-hat to output 3. Then it's automatically being bussed out. Let's say I want my overheads to output 4 and let's say so in this way we could just take all of your different outputs and send it out. And if you wanted to open up kind of like the automation pane, you could see all the individual outs here, but you can see it broken in the mixer. Now if we wanted to do it with a beat agent kit, it's pretty similar concept. We don't necessarily do it from the mixer, but if I'm here, we can say, okay, I want to take, so everything's going out of one stereo out. I could select it here, and then we have 32 stereo outs that we could assign. So I could take my kicks. So let's assign these to so I want to take that and assign it to bus 4. Let's take this and send it to bus 4 as well, or whatever. So we could assign these different. So again, select the pad, and in the main area, just come here and you could just select the multiple outputs just right there. So just select the pad and tell what output you want it to go to. So it's really pretty straightforward. All right, so we see how can I render and place multiple tracks in real time for external processing. All right, so let's say, all right, so I'll just drag over some. All right, so say I just have multiple tracks here. So whether you're doing, so say I have all sorts of effects processing and everything here. So let me just select all these tracks, and I'm going to put an annoying flanger on them all. All right, so I will just come over here. Let's just say, okay, I want to go to flanger on all of the effects, all the channels. Just do it on all the selected ones this time so it'll work as I. Okay, so let's say now I have okay, so now, if there is real time, if there is external processing involved, you could just, again, come over here, select your multiple events, and go to render in place. And I'll just say, we could select the events or the tracks. So if I just say, okay, I want to take all of the tracks here. So we'll go to edit, to render in place, go to render settings. We'll say we'll include the complete signal path. We can give it a specific name. We can mix it down to one track or not. So as we do this, it'll just now create all of the processing, and I'll just choose not to. When I go to render in place, I'll choose to disable the source track so that you see that the source tracks will still be there. And then the original tracks are disabled, and it will do that in real time if you have external processing on. So just like normal rendering in place. So let me know if that works for you, Michael. All right, wonderful to see Nick is able to join us. Hope you had a wonderful holiday season. Do my best to catch up here. So. All right, great to see JVI back. All right, so a question. Is there any advantage to work in 96K rather than 48K? So sometimes it could be very material dependent, like what material you're doing. So if you're doing maybe classical, if you're doing, an Alison Krauss type record where it's squeaky clean Americana, Gary Pachoza-esque type of productions, those stuff could, those materials could really benefit from 96K. I remember talking with Skinny, who's kind of one of is on Zed's team. And someone asked me to check with him what sample rate they use, and they use 44.1. Excuse me, hang on. And he said, yeah, we find out 44.1 works great for everything we're doing. And he's like, but if I was doing like an Alison Krauss record, I would do 96 or 192. So so check, try your own recording. Realize that as you work in higher sample rates, that you're going to take more processing power. Sometimes the reverbs will sound a little cleaner at 96K, and you might notice on decays. But if you're doing kind of like, a hardcore hip hop track, you may not notice a huge difference, or depending if you're doing like a death metal thing, the subtlety may not be there, but something that could really benefit from subtlety, you may benefit from 96K. But if your song doesn't sound good, it's not the sample rate's fault. All right, so we have a question. In Groove Agent, is there a way to copy a pattern from one groove and assign it to a pad in a different? All right, so let's jump back up here. So let's say we have a pattern here. All right, so I'm going to copy this pad and go to the Urban Ballads kit here and go to the pattern. And I'm going to, let me cut this one before. And then paste pad. So let me see if I cut this pad, and then, all right, so I'm going to copy this pad and paste into this one. And let me try it with the full Groove Agent version, see if that makes a difference. Or let me try loading this up without, I'll load a kit without. I'll just cut. Okay, so we have no patterns here. Not sure if we can. Still playing. So it looks like it's per pad, so, but let's say if I. Let's say if I cut that one, and let's say. So you can do it within the same agent and move it to a different pad, but not necessarily drag pads. Let's see. So if you just drag it, you could drag it from one pattern pad to another as well. So looks like you can. Sorry about that. All right. All right. So we have a question from Charles Davis. Hi, Greg. How can I set up different views in the same project? I like that one view for recording, one for mixing, one for mastering. Thanks. All right. So, probably what you could do for this is, have it set up for workspaces. So let's say, okay, I want to do tracking. So I only want to see these particular tracks. And let's say I don't want to see that. So I'm going to come over here and save a workspace. So we'll add a workspace. We'll call it a project workspace, or we could do global workspace and say tracking. Okay, now I may have a workspace that's already set up for mixer. So we'll come over here and say, okay, let's go to our mixer and we'll update our workspace. So you could have workspaces that are set for the project or workspaces that are set for globally. So let's say now I wanted to come over here and go back to my tracking view. I could just say, let's go, here's tracking. Here is mixing. So again, just go to your workspaces, and then you could just toggle back and forth between different views as workspaces. So just go to your workspaces menu and then click on add workspace, and then you should be able to set up your view that you have for the three of them and be able to just simply quickly navigate through keyboard shortcuts for all of those. Okay, reading through comments. Okay, so we see from, is there a key command to start spectral layers? So I think that there is a, since it loads up as a extension that you could go to, let's see if it can go to the extensions. I think, let's see if it's available under extensions, maybe. Yeah, because it's kind of loaded in through an extension, like an ARA2 extension. So, I don't think that there is. So you have to physically open up the extension there. So I don't think there's a key command to do it specifically. Sorry about that. Okay, so we see a question. Is there a way to shorten a MIDI clip to, like, for instance, half the length without shortening the length of the notes, like using time scale but keeping the note lengths the same? All right, so we can do, so let's say we have our MIDI clip here. If we change the sizing mode to sizing applies time stretch, we could just come here and we could keep it proportional. That will change the length of the notes. I think if we go into the logical editor, that we could choose, and there's probably even factory presets for this for note length. I want to say that there's a like double tempo. So if you wanted to take this, there's a logical editor preset where this will kind of double the tempo of the events. And you could also do stuff where, you could say, I want to set this by 0.5 and, so you could check out like the double tempo. But if you, so I'm not sure if we could, you want to keep the note lengths the same, but just let me know if the time stretching would work for you for what you wanted to do. Let's see, at 317 we're at 116 likes. And Filter Freak says the community is getting more constant, so that's good. All right, so we have a question. Does Cubase have a feature to analyze audio track volume and creating volume automation curve following the audio? So I don't know of any feature that does that in Cubase. I'm not sure what the viability of it really is. I mean, because you still have to, it's not necessarily, like if you have dynamics, I wouldn't want if I had material that was, soft and loud, I wouldn't want the fader to match that. I would want to adjust the fader to, enhance, to make that more consistent. So I don't know of a feature that does that. Doesn't sound like such a great idea to me. So we see question, any tips for game composers using Cubase? So there's obviously a lot of people doing game composition. So I don't know if, anything specifically for games. I know a lot of people will choose to, do multiple variations. Like using the arranger track for, being able to come up with different arrangements. Depending on the level of the game, if you're doing like a AAA title where you're going to have like a full orchestra, but, realize that when you're doing games, you might have to jump between, 4 different soundtracks at any time, depending on what the player does. And to make sure that, the music that's playing at that time, won't be shifting keys like from C to C sharp. Excuse me. While, just because the player jumped, so to have continuity for that. But if you have any specific questions on this would be good for gaming, I'd be happy to answer that. But I don't compose for games, but I've worked with lots of game composers over the years. Okay, so we see a question from Thermonuclear. Does my Cubase 5 install old 32-bit plugins on Windows 10? So I think it will install, but it won't be accessible from Cubase 8 or higher. So we have a question, why are more Cubase users switching to Studio One? Well, it seems like we have a lot of Studio One users that have switched to Cubase. It could be maybe they borrowed a lot of same concepts and they've specifically marketed towards Cubase users, but we've had so many people migrating from other DAWs, including Studio One, to us. So. Gerald Ely says, well, since marketing is watching this, no subscription, please. So I think that they understand that, but it's always good to reiterate it. All right, so we have a question from JVI. I really need to get a choir. Is Steinberg working on developing one like Iconica Orchestral? Because if so, I'd rather wait till it's ready than purchasing elsewhere. So, check out, one that's really good for a lot of general purpose, like oohs and ahs, that's available inside of Halion already. One to check out is going to be the Olympus. Check out the Olympus Elements Choir. There's lots of great stuff that comes with this. So let me just get rid of some of these. So, if you're doing that, I think I have all sorts of horrible stuff on that. Let me just do a new project. But check out the Olympus choirs as well. And that's available for Halion. So you could come over here and, set up different controllers to just, go back and forth. So if you want it. So it's done by Sound Iron. So check out the Sound Iron stuff. All right, so it's wonderful to see Graham Witcher able to drop on to say hello real quick. All right, so I see a question. I'm using 45-year-old tracks, restores, and digital mixing for vinyl. Will there be a significant difference on the end result? Very audible. So I think anything that's 45 years old is always good to transfer to digital to have a, to have a version. I've been involved with, lots of, I got to help do the Steely Dan master transfer recordings. So, it was good that we did that as we had to bake tapes and stuff like that. So I think that you'll have more consistency, and especially as you're kind of working with 45-year-old tape, it's good to have backups of that. Right. All right. I just see kind of a further comment. I'm trying to mix like the 70s because it was a band of the 70s. So probably the band in the 70s would want to have every possible modern invention that was available to them at the time. And now you have, 50 years of technology to incorporate. So I would take advantage of that. Steve McRae, wonderful to see you on the live stream. Any known issues updating to Windows 11 with Cubase 12 Pro? So Cubase 12 Pro runs great on Windows 11. Just make sure that all of your plugins, all your audio interface, your MIDI interface, all of that works with Windows 11. But generally, it's a pretty seamless upgrade, so I don't think you'll have anything to worry about. Okay, reading through comments. Thanks for all the great questions. I know we have some questions that were sent in I should get to in a couple minutes. All right, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Any news on Halion 7 yet? None that I can share, but hopefully we'll see stuff happening soon. So, all right, so we have great to see Captain Energy music from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania area. Thanks for joining us. Michael Teams was happy to hear Hot Mess music. It's still one of my favorite tracks. Great writing, Michael. And great drumming and guitar work from Gareth and Pablo. All right, so you see a question. I use VEP, and I have a huge template, and sometimes when I select different track, just a simple click, or if I switch from the key editor to the main window, it explodes and peaks and breaks my ears and speakers. I haven't really come across that. I don't work with VE Pro personally, so I may not have. So I see Jazz Dudes kind of asking what I would ask if it's only on VEP connected tracks. All right, I see Jazz Dudes maybe helping out with that. Right. All right, so we see, hello, Greg. Are there a possibility to shift format of an audio file without Very Audio and without plugins? So the only way I know to do it is in Cubase is to do it via a plugin or Very Audio. One thing that a lot of people don't know, an included plugin that you can shift formats on is if you go, and I know you said not a plugin, but if you go to Pitch Correct, under pitch shift, and then you could just adjust, and this is the format shift control here. So there's nothing natively. It would have to be done via a plugin. Okay, so you see, hi Greg, in Howling Sonic there's a preset called Smoking Solo Strat. Single notes are clear, two notes played together are distorted. I'm not finding this setting to dial down this distortion. All right. Sometimes some settings may be only accessible inside of like the full Howlian. All right, so let me just find this preset, see if I... All right, so when you play two notes together. So let's see if we put it into mono. If it... So if you just put it in mono, that will eliminate it, but you may want to adjust a polyphony. So sometimes there could be settings under the hood. So probably if we had it in Howlian, we could adjust the sound, but maybe not inside of Howlian Sonic SE. So I'll see if I could figure out what the particular setting is. If you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. See, Gerald Ely just says dragging patterns between drum kits is his tip for the day. All right, so we have Roger checking in from Dusseldorf and Tommy from Norway. Thanks for joining. All right, so we see, what is the benefit of these separate workspaces? So, if you find yourself always opening multiple windows and saying, I want this window positioned here, like I want the mixer opened, and I wanted a dedicated view of, my control room, that we could have, instead of having to open up 4 or 5 windows to get into a mixing mode or 4 or 5 windows to get into a tracking mode, or to just immediately look at everything being processed through spectral layers, we could just do it directly from workspaces. So it just kind of speeds up the workflow process for you. See, Michael Pierce is watching the House Speaker vote, and this stuff is fascinating. He's and listening here in the background. So I was watching it right before the right before the live stream started. So, all right. So we see a question: how can we quantize audio? Okay, so let's come over here. So there's a number of different ways of doing it, but it's really kind of similar concept. So let's come over and say we have like our drum loop here, and I'll just make this larger so we could all see it. So when you go to quantize, let's go to the quantize panel. You just want to make sure that you have like your audio warp turned on. I'm going to set my value here to eighth notes for this. I'll select the event, and now so if I don't have audio warp turned on, I hit Q, nothing happens. When the audio warp is turned on for the audio, that now we could just come over here and I'll just adjust my swing percentage. So let's say to 73, 87%. So now when I hit Q, you'll see that the audio shifts just like that. So that's how you could quantize audio. It's really the same way as quantizing MIDI data. All right, let's get to some of the questions that were mailed in. Thanks for all the great questions. Hope that everyone's learned some great tips and tricks. All right, so we had a question. Can you explain the benefits of the part editor? All right, so a lot of times, so let's say if I had multiple audio events, like different drum loops, or I've done different editing on particular events here, and let's say I've like painstakingly have, moved all the spacing, and I don't want to be able to adjust the spacing or timing between these events. So what I could do now is I could choose to glue the events together. So events are kind of their own separate entities, but once we glue events together, we now have a part. Now this part is a container of different audio events. So now I move it, their relative positions between the different sections is intact. Now people often get this question when it's like, oh, I don't see my clip handles to edit. So what you have to do is double click and you go into a part editor. So within the part editor at this point, we could now do your fade and clip gain handles. And if I wanted to come over here and say, okay, let's make this event a little larger, I could come over here, we'll enlarge the part, and we could move different parts around. So now, but it's all within one collective entity as well. So now to get a part into a series of events, select it, and go to the project, and we could say dissolve part. So we'll just come over here, go to audio menu, and then we'll dissolve part, and now these will all turn back into audio events where their handles are preserved. And I could mess up and accidentally move one. So that's the benefits of using the part editor. All right, so our next question. Says, I have trouble with multi-track free warp with phase coherent button on. The play tool does not work on those tracks. The pre-fader pencil automation does not work. The fade outs behave weirdly. Most of all, when I toggle the phase coherence button while playback, the sound changes as if it were influencing offline changes already made. Is this proper behavior? Okay, so let's say we'll listen to our drums here. So we'll just say, so we'll have our folder. So I'm just going to activate phase coherent audio warp. So turning that on doesn't seem to make any difference sonically. So when I want to play, we could just kind of come over here Let's see. So if I wanted to scrub, we could do that. Or if we want to put this into play mode. And of course, the benefit of it is that I can just come over here and let's go to our free warp. I could drop in warp markers and we'll just kind of zoom in here. And now I could move kind of entire drum parts earlier or later, so as we want to listen to it. So it's just bad edits I made, but you could just come and, but just turning on doesn't seem to make any difference sonically on my end. All right, so we have a question. Please, is there a way when using the transpose track in one project to get all pitches notes following when you do so? And at the opposite, for example, I don't want my drum pitches to kind of follow because it changes the drum sound setting sounds. Many thanks in advance for your precious help and expertise with. All right, so all you have to do is, let's say we're going to introduce a transpose track. Okay, so as soon as we do this, we'll just add transpose track. So let's say I'm going to put in a couple different points. We'll say, okay, let's do it here, here, here. All right, so if we do a transpose track, everything now, so we'll just say, and I'll say, let's go up a semitone or a whole tone. So now everything went up, including the drums. But I may not want the drums to change. So what I could do is I could select my drums, and then we will see this little thing for global transpose on the info line. Set that to independent. So now as we play, and I change this, I'll go up to, my drums will stay the same pitch, but my guitar and bass will go down. So let's say, okay, here I want this to be -2. So when you get to here, the drums will stay the same pitch. Then it's going to go down 4 semitones. Then as we get closer to the end here, we'll go right back to where we were. So the trick is to select the events, and you'll see global transpose, set it to independent. Then it won't follow the transpose track. So select the event, set it to independent, and then you'll be all set. All right, so we see question, is there a way, or can there be a way, option on the right-hand pane of the VST tab open or mimic, duplicate track colors in the track super window, in the track view window? For those of us that use track colors of different instrument groups, it'd be super handy or if we see these on a VST pane as well, it could really help when looking for a specific instrument group. Okay, so I guess if we were over here, all right, so let's say we have a VST instrument. So let's come over here to media, to VST instruments. So I guess we want to be able to set the instrument track as it's dropped in. So let me just... All right, so right now this can't tie into the preference. So there isn't a way to set it automatically, but it does work. So if we come over here, we could say, use the track's default color or use the previous track color. So now every time that I go to add a plugin here, it will use the same color as we drag it over. Or we could have it automatically increment colors by 1. Now, if you wanted it to always be the same color, like strings are always this and my drums are this color, I would just save it as a track preset. So if you come here and say, these are what drums are to me, I will come over, let's save the track preset, and we'll make it January 3rd, 2022. Okay, so now when we go over to our media, we'll go home. Let's go to not favorites, but to presets. So we'll go to user presets, and let's go to track presets for VST instruments, and January 3rd, 2022. And then you could just have all the colors included with that, or it could, just use the default track colors. So again, it's really kind of up to what this, let's see if we do now use default track color. If we drag that over, then it'll be carried over. So, but check just your settings here and maybe consider using track presets for that. So again, in the preferences, when you come over here, you could just use a track's default color. And once that's been set, then those colors would automatically be carried over. All right, so next email, I have a few questions. Is there a way to set the panning of selected groups? Is there a way to set the color of selected groups? Can 1 and 2 be done in a single macro? So we can't necessarily set the panning and this was originally asked from like a Project Logical editor. But if I wanted to add a group track, what we could do, and we wanted to colorize the group track that is selected. So I will come over here and let's add a couple more group tracks. All right, so I want to take the selected group track here, group 2, and let's add a color. So we'll go to our Project Logical editor and say we want to transform. And we say media type is a group. And we want to say the group, we want to say property is set to the event is selected. And under action target, we want to say set color. And we can say set it to this color here. So now we could take this selected group tracks and colorize it. So if I wanted to take these 2 tracks that are selected now, and I wanted to colorize it to a different color. So now that those are selected, we could choose the color, and we can save that as a preset to colorize the selected group tracks. All right, let's go back, see if we get 1 or 2 more live questions in. So thank you for all of the questions. Let's sneak back here. Excuse me. All right. All right, let me just find my spot. So let me clear my throat. Hang on. Hang on, my son's knocking on the door. All right, so I see from JVI. Thanks, Greg. Choir Story. Is Olympus part of Absolute? So I think it might be part of the Absolute collection. So you could check that out. Okay, so we see from Tim Heiser, will the inspector tab ever be expandable? So I think that we may see some changes coming for more opportunities in the inspector tab. So, and where it could be, show you more information quickly. All right. So we just see, love these live streams, mostly are above my knowledge level, but just now beginning to record stuff, but the info is awesome. Any advice for recording drums or a prior live stream I can reference? The one thing I would do with drums is just to come over here. So let's say we're going to, I'll do a new track here. So we'll create empty and let's say, okay, we're going to do, let's say 6 mono tracks, and we'll do 2 stereo, let's say for overheads and rooms. All right, so the one thing, when recording drums is take all the tracks here, select them, right click, and put them into a folder. So we could just say, where is it? So move selected tracks to new folder. Okay, so now we'll just call this drums. All right, so if you needed to do like multiple kick, mics, you can come over here, and if you needed to invert the phase or polarity of different mics, like for bottom, snare, to name different tracks, just come here, type in. You could just type in the tab key to name the next track, like that, if you wanted to. Once everything is set up for your drums, and you kind of, like this is my studio drum kit, select all the tracks and just come over here and save a track preset. So we'll just call this drum multi 2. So next time you go to record, you can just come over here. So let's say we have no tracks. You could go to user presets and go to track presets to multi, and we'll say drums multi 2, drag them over, and then everything can be automatically set, named with all the routing for you. All right, so with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. We're just about out of time. I want to thank everyone for the wonderful questions, and we'll see everyone back on Friday. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy, and looking forward to answering questions on Friday's live stream. Take care.